Again, welcome everybody to our webinar From Idea to Automation, Building a Complete Process in Tikit. I'll jump right into our agenda. A couple of housekeeping items first. We are recording this session, and so it will be available in YouTube, and the links to all that will go out in our socials. And we are also having the Q&A panel. So if you have a question, feel free to jump in the Q&A section in Teams and leave your question. And if we don't get to cover it today, don't worry, we will reach out. We'll take the questions offline. And then again, if you want to ask a question anonymously, please make sure you include that in your question so that we don't call your name out. Getting into our agenda, again, we're talking about from idea to automation. And so what we want to do is build out an entire process and how we would do that in Tikit. And that's going to start with the current method, what that process looks like today before we build the process into Tikit and automate. And so we'll talk about the idea around the process itself. We'll talk about how we take the existing process and how we're going to design it. If you see the next step there, design it in Tikit, and then finally build it. And hopefully we'll have a demonstration where we go through the process that we've built and everything works as it's supposed to, as demonstrations always do. Just a little bit about me and Jeff. I am Justin Workman. I'm on the customer success team. I might be your customer success manager. I have been with Cyerson for 8 years, and yeah, on the customer success team, that means everything from implementing Tikit in a professional services engagement to helping with whatever you might need as a Cyerson customer. That's me, Jeff.
All right, and I'm Jeff, also part of the customer success team. And yeah, just like Justin, we're all about making sure that we can align Tikit to your business goals and ensure that you have everything you need to meet all your objectives and get the most out of the tool. So that's what we do day to day, and some days that includes doing these wacky webinars. Well, I'm gonna tell you guys a little story about when I logged a ticket last week, my experience. I logged this ticket looking for a Copilot license, but unfortunately there was no deflection, so I picked up the default ticket login experience, and that meant that somebody had to triage that ticket and get it assigned. And then it turns out to be escalated to Justin because he's the M365 admin. He knew that it needed approval, like most processes do, but who can remember who approves what around here? And there's so many processes and so many different approvers. So Justin had to go looking for the document in SharePoint where we've documented the approval steps, and searching through SharePoint to find that. And then eventually found the right document, and it turns out that the business policy is for a Copilot license. It needs to be approved by, first of all, the line manager and then the director as well. So then Justin's got to go into Entra and look up my line manager of who that is. And then he's got to go back into Tikit and add my manager as an approver on that ticket. There it is being there. And then finally it gets approved. So I've got my license, right? Right? Well, no, because I still need to be assigned that license. Justin has to go and add me in the M365 admin portal to the group where that license is deployed. For that, he needs admin rights. So it has to be him. It can't go to anybody else. So we're waiting on Justin for that because it needs those privileges. And then finally, I get my license and I can complete my very important work, which, as you can see today, was creating some cute cat pictures in Copilot. Can we do better? Justin, I logged a ticket last week with you, and it took a very long time to complete. That was unacceptable to me as an employee of this business.
Right. There's a lot of steps involved in that process that you went through.
Surely we can do it better. Can we do something to make this a better experience?
Absolutely. So we can build the process into Ticket. But let me ask you, if we're going to build this process that you went through with the Copilot license, are we going to just do the Copilot license, or maybe we could do a single process for other M365 license, additional licenses beyond just your normal user license? Does that make sense?
So we can do a single process within Ticket for any type of license, M365 license,
That's correct. We
even
absolutely
though
can.
it's different sort of steps to approve it and to deploy it.
That's right. That's absolutely what we can do, and that's what we're going to do.
Wow, let's do that.
Let's do it. So we're going through this kind of scenario where we're going to build a process based on an existing process that, while it is manual and it's available, we could automate it, we could streamline it, we could make it better. And so what do we need to be able to do that? Well, the first thing we need is we need to understand the process, right? Before we can automate anything, we need to understand the process. And so that would be our first step. So Jeff, do you have a repeatable process, including the logic around who needs to approve and how to assign these licenses? Is there a repeatable process?
Yes.
Excellent. Can you describe that process for me a bit? I know you kind of went through it in your ticket experience last week, but backing up into a more high-level approach, what is that process?
Um, I think it's a simple two-step process. First of all, the request needs to be approved. That differs slightly depending on the license that has been requested. And then the license needs to be deployed, assigned to that user.
Right. Okay. And so the next step that we would do is we would gather the necessary inputs to start that process off. You don't have to tell me what those are right now, but assume you have those.
Hmm.
And then finally, what we would need is a way for users to consume that process. Now, we saw when he started the process, he got the generic ticket experience. So obviously he's already using Ticket, and that's going to be our method, but we are going to have to wire up this process to Ticket Virtual Agent and or the service catalog so that end users can initiate the process. So here is our, again, repeatable process. Jeff has given me those steps, the approval and basically the implementation or the application of the license, right? There we are, approval and license application. But as we build this process and ticket, because we know we're going to have kind of a dynamic approval based on what license is selected, we're going to need a third step, which is going to be that setup process, and then construction of that approval phase, and then finally the license application phase or implementation, if you like. I do want to point out too that this could still be a manual process, but we can still build it against a life cycle in Ticket, whether it's automated or it's manual. Building it into a life cycle is going to allow us to help control the flow of the ticket, whether it's manual or automated. We do intend to automate it, but putting it into a life cycle helps helps the requester, helps the agents, helps the organization see the process, see what's happening, including the setup. So because it's dynamic approval, if we're still going through that SharePoint process, we can still do a lookup in the setup phase and add the approvals dynamically. But again, we're going to document it. We're going to automate it. And so it's going to be much faster, much more streamlined. And he doesn't have to sit there with this approval and hope that somebody finally gets around to implementing.
Mm.
So the next step is going to be gather required inputs. And in Ticket, we're going to use a form/template because right now forms are linked to templates. So we're going to use a form or a template to gather the required inputs. So Jeff, in this scenario, what are your inputs for this process?
Well, I guess we need the requester to provide their justification. Why do they need this? Because this is going
Right,
to go for approval. I want that approving manager to be able to see the reason why they need it. They've got to justify it because
right.
it's expensive.
Yep. Anything else?
Um, well, I guess of course as well they're gonna have to because this is a single process for all those different types of license. We're gonna have to have a way to select which one you're after.
Right. Cool. Okay. And so our form, I mean, is there any other, I mean, that's basically it, right? We just need a
I think that's
reason
it.
and we need the type of license that they're after. And so basically our form is going to look something like this, just a simple 2-input form. Um, and that's sufficient to capture the requirements and then put them through the process. And then finally, we need a way to initiate that process. Like I said, our users are already familiar with going to Tikit, whether that's through the Tikit virtual agent or the service catalog. As we saw, Jeff got the generic process again, but now we're going to build a specific process around license requests and application, and
So I
they'll
would
be
like to
able to,
build it so that when a user types what I typed, I want a Copilot license, it's going to kick them straight into this process. And I guess any of those types of license, same experience.
right, exactly.
Hmm.
So I am going to share my screen. And we are going to, um, got to pick the right screen here. Bear with me one moment. We're gonna build some of this process, and some of it is already built for time's sake. I saw a hand go up. If you have a question, please feel free to use the Q&A panel. We'll try to get around to it when we can. Um, Jeff, can you see my screen?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Okay, so here I am in my life cycle. So the first thing, like I said, the first thing we did was we understood the process. We kind of teased out this repeatable process. Jeff said approval license application. That makes sense. And again, I added this third step of setup, whereby this is where we're doing the lookups for the dynamic approval. And our life cycle looks something like this, where we have a setup phase and a Power Automate task. Because again, we're automating this piece, not waiting on someone to do it all manually. And so I have a Power Automate task. I called it setup license approval. When you're building a life cycle, and again, this, I think, there's a number of ways you could go about this. I think building the life cycle first, the template second, and the service catalog item third makes the most logical sense. And I'll talk about that as we go. Well, and I guess if we're building flows as well, which I'm going to show the flows that are responsible for this process as well, those are pre-built too. But those will come later after, at the very least, after the template is created. And so when you're building out the phases, and the Power Automate tasks, you want to give them a name, even though the flows don't exist yet. You want to give them a name that makes sense when you're going to select them in Power Automate. And so it's tied to this license request lifecycle. It's tied to this setup phase, and then the Power Automate task itself is called setup license approval because that's exactly what it's doing. Again, that doesn't necessarily have to be the name of the flow when you build it in Power Automate. I would recommend some sort of correlation, and I'll show that when I get into Power Automate. And then the next step is the approval. And if we look at the approval, it has a kind of generic name right now, license edition approval. We're going to modify that with the Power Automate flow. And there's no approvers because we're going to do completely dynamic approval. We're going to have line manager. If it's any of these, Power Automate, Power BI, or Copilot, we're always going to do line manager. That's part of the policy that he was talking about. And then for Power BI, we don't need any additional approval, but for Power Automate and Copilot, we do need additional approval. And in our flow, we're actually going to inject an additional approval into this phase, into the approval phase for the whoever that additional approval might be. And then finally, we're going to apply the license. And again, we're going to go back to Power Automate for that. So you want to make sure that, again, the Power Automate task is named appropriately so that you can find it in Power Automate when you build the flow. So this is basically what the life cycle looks like. Again, just 3 simple phases, 3 simple tasks for now, or approvals. Again, we're going to build on that, but we'll get there. So then the next step, now that I have the process built, the life cycle built, is to capture those inputs like we talked about. And so again, here's my template. It's called license request. It's a request. The category is permissions. It's assigned to my service desk team. And then this is what the form.
What if you needed some of those properties to be dynamic as well, Justin? Because maybe like the assignment or something else would be based on the input of the user. In this case, the license type.
Yeah, so we could absolutely do that in Power Automate as well. So if, for example, if it's Power BI and it needs to go to a separate team that needs to go to the analytics team or whatever, we could absolutely do that in Power Automate based on, and when we get to the flow, which I want to, be very careful about my steps here, but when we get to the flow, we'll kind of talk about where that could go in the flow.
Okay, so that setup kind of concept we've got could kind of set up any manner of things on that ticket, including
on the ticket, absolutely.
The assignment, the approval, yeah.
Absolutely. And so now we're building out the form. And again, in the example we talked about, we only had 2 inputs. And we still actually only do, because if we look at the request, we've got it turned off. And this is a feature that came out this year where we can expose ticket properties on our custom forms, but hide them from the user. We can expose them all the way to the end user. But what I'm doing here is I'm exposing the request field, leaving it invisible, and that allows me to build a dynamic title for the ticket as well for the request. So, someone's going to come in here and say, I need a license, I need a Copilot license, I need this or that. We don't necessarily want that being the title of the ticket, and so we're formatting the title of the ticket in this way by having a request control but not exposing it to the end user by turning the visibility off. And another cool part of that is because the inputs have an ID, we can use that ID as a variable, and again, we're always going to get license request and whatever they select as the option. And then again, here's our license type: Power Automate, Power BI, Copilot. That's what they're going to be able to select as the dropdown. And then the reason, actually, I want the prompt of enter your justification for needing the license to come through. But again, we're building the reason, and that's going to be the place where they can justify their need for the license.
So, Justin, sorry, I know you just click save there. Can I bring you back to that, the license ID in the curly brackets?
Yep.
Can you just explain the format again there to bring in those kind of you bring in the value of another field into that field? Is that how that works?
That's right. So not the value. Well, it's going to be the value, yes, but we're populating. The variable becomes the ID name. So in the double curly braces, we have license type, which is the ID of the choice set. And so the value they get selected, whether it's Power Automate, Power BI, or Copilot, is what's going to show up as the title of the ticket.
So the title of the ticket will be license request
dash Power Automate
Copilot,
or Copilot. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Very neat. Very neat. That'll be great for reporting and just seeing all those tickets kind of together in the list.
Right. Exactly. That's the idea. So then the next thing I would do, and I just wanted to show, I don't know if I showed this or not, but when we're setting up the template, we add the life cycle to the template. That's, again, another reason. I think it makes sense from a process perspective in terms of building out this process to do the life cycle first, because, again, it allows you to kind of map the existing process onto this concept of a life cycle, but also from a technical perspective in the context of Tikit, it makes sense to do the life cycle first, because when you go to build the template, now you have a life cycle to select. And so that's what I did. I selected that life cycle that corresponds to this process. The next thing I'm going to do here, now that I have my life cycle done and my template built, is I'm going to build the flows, which I've already built them, but I do want to show them. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have a trigger in Power Automate, and that trigger is going to be based on, again, the life cycle, the phase, and the Power Automate task name. And that's why when you're naming the task in the life cycle, you want to give it a name that's going to be easily selectable to pick. If I didn't have phase, if I didn't have life cycle, I would have a whole list of tasks that doesn't make any sense. So we drill down on the life cycle, the setup, and we give it a name that makes sense. So when we select it in here, it's easy to find. Then the next step I'm doing is I'm getting the ticket. The reason I'm doing that is because we're triggering on the Power Automate task, not any kind of ticket trigger, ticket with an E, not an I. Because we're triggering on the Power Automate task, we don't have this card answer JSON, which is the property that we get when we submit the form, when this requester submits the form, and we need that card answer JSON to be able to determine what options they selected so that we can do our dynamic approval, or the second part of our dynamic approval, I should say. The next thing so I'm parsing that card answer JSON that I get again from the get ticket, and then you can see the IDs of the form inputs. License type is the choice that the type of license, and then reason is the justification that we discussed. And then
that matches up exactly to the IDs you set on the form.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yes. And then we're targeting the approval. We want to get the approvals from this ticket because we're going to update the approval subsequently, but we have to have an ID to target to know which one that we want to update. So here we're, again, targeting the life cycle and the phase, which we know is approval. And here you can see I can pick any of the phases, but I'm picking approval because that's where my approval lives. Surprise, surprise, naming works. And here I'm going to get the manager no matter what. If manager approval was only part of one of these, I could move this down into this switch statement that I'm going to discuss a bit more in just a moment. But because manager approval is required for all, whether it's Power Automate, Copilot, or Power BI, we're going to go ahead and get the manager first, and then we're going to update the approval that we got from the life cycle as it exists today. And then we're going to update the approval title to include the type of license that we're asking for, and then we're going to update the additional details. So when the approver gets a notification about this approval, they know what it's for, they know who it's for, and they know why the person needs it or why they say they need it, right? Maybe they'll reject it because their reason is invalid. But
what, like cat pictures, you mean?
That's a valid reason. I meant something that's invalid. Yeah.
Just checking.
I mean, how else are you supposed to develop that cat picture? Like, you're gonna do it in Paint? No, you need
right, exactly.
You need Copilot to do that.
What else are you supposed to do with your day if not make cat pictures?
Right, exactly. And you can see here that when I get the manager back, that's what I'm including as the approver now. I'm selecting the user's principal name from the get manager, and that's the manager there that's returned that from the requester. So I'm passing the requester into the get manager, and I'm passing the manager into the approver, such that the requester's manager becomes the first approver. And then based on our policy,
so we get the different process for different types of license, right? As we're talking about, It's one process for all three. And this is where the magic happens.
Exactly. So we're doing a switch, which is just a logical control in Power Automate or other programming languages. It's similar to an if-else, but the if can be, multiple conditions, which is what we're looking at here. So we're switching on the license type. And then if it's Power Automate, then we're going to add IT approval to we're actually going to add a new approval altogether, again with the same title, but the approver in this case, because it's IT, is always going to the same person. And then in the case of Copilot, we're adding director. Again, just for time's sake and demonstration purposes, I'm hard coding that to myself just so we can see that. But you could do the same thing here. Maybe you get the manager's manager, and that way that's the director, whatever. You would add additional logic here. But again, I'm just hard coding it for time and demonstration purposes. But this is how you could handle whatever option is selected. This is how you would handle that. Is you would parse the card answer JSON, and then based on what was selected in your dropdown, you could have any number of paths that you know.
So let me make sure I'm reading this right. So we're saying that if it's Power Automate, it's going to be first of all the line manager, and then that IT worker for approval.
That's right.
If it's Copilot, it's first of all manager and then the director.
That's right.
And if it's Power BI, it's going to be just line manager because there is no second step there.
That's right.
And if I compare that to the policy in SharePoint that I can't find, then I'm sure that's correct.
Exactly. That's the idea, is we know based on that policy, we can map that policy onto, the automation, onto the ticket process, and ideally it should always work out.
If I had a Copilot license, I could ask to find that document in SharePoint to check.
Right, exactly. We'll get there. We're working on it. And then the other step in the process is the after approval, which this is the setup, and then we're doing this. Once this is complete, then we're going to they'll approve the request, and that'll transition it to the final piece, which is the implementation or the license application, and that's where we'll actually add them to the group. Again, we're switching on the license type that we get from card answer JSON. That's going to be the choice they selected. If it's Power Automate, we're going to add them to the Power Automate group. If it's Copilot, we're going to add them to the Copilot group. And if it's Power BI, we're going to add them to the Power BI group. And then finally, we're going to update the Power Automate task to succeeded so that the life cycle will transition like it's supposed to.
And Justin, what happens if it doesn't get approved, or let's say one of those, particularly those kind of two-stage ones, one of them approves and one of them doesn't? Will this still run and apply the license anyway, or does it?
Absolutely not. And that's one of the great things about building approval into Tikit is if the approver rejects the approval, say it's Power BI and we just have the line manager because we're not adding any additional approvals. If your manager rejects it, then the automation doesn't kick off. If the manager does, but the director doesn't, again, it's going to close the ticket, and this Power Automate flow is never going to run for this ticket. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's what we want.
Cool. Okay, so now I'm going to submit this ticket as a user. Actually, the final piece, that was the building the automation. The next thing we need to do is, and then I haven't pre-built this, is we need to build the service catalog item so that we can expose it to that end user, right? So I'm going to go to service catalog and ticket. I'm a ticket admin, and I'm going to build the catalog item. So Jeff, what are the phrases that you would expect to be able to use to initiate this process?
Yeah, I like this task because you get to think like an end user and imagine what they would ask. So yeah, I need a Copilot license, and the other ones as well are in there. But I think what's really interesting doing this kind of task and say thinking like a user is this is the solution, right? That they need a license is the solution. They might not be aware of that solution, and they might just be reporting kind of their experience, their symptoms, or what they're trying to achieve. So I think it's worth adding a couple more phrases around, like, I'm trying to publish a dashboard because that requires the license. They might not know that, but that's if they get that, if they type in that prompt, then that's still the right process to throw back. Or maybe I want to generate cute cat pictures. because if that's what they're asking, then they're going to need that license. So it's important to think about not just the kind of the outcome that we all know in IT or other departments where we kind of deal with these processes, but think it from the business side of things. What are they going to put into the system? What are they going to be experiencing that's going to cause them to come here and need this process?
Right. So we got a couple of additional phrases. That's great. Appreciate that. And again, that's something if you're building, if you're working with an internal team and you're going to build out a process, these are definitely things that you would probably put back on them because they're going to know that process. If you're building a process for something that's not IT, they're going to know that process better than you are. And so, they're going to know what the prompts are for that process. So after we've captured the phrases from the user,
And maybe just one more, just a generic, I want a new license, a license request. And that is a suggestion from the audience. So thank you very much.
okay, cool, excellent. And then I'm going to just go ahead and mark the status as active. Just brief note on that right now. If you mark it in draft or in review, it will not be exposed in either the service catalog or Ticket Virtual Agent. So I'm going to make it active. I'm going to make it as a request offering because we want it exposed in the service catalog. And then I'm going to use the template that we've already established, which is license request. Because I enabled the request offering, I do have to go over here and do a little bit of configuration. So I'm going to call it license request. Let's say request, I could type a new license for Power BI, Power Automate, or Copilot. I'm going to tie it to my requests service offering.
Justin, before we move on, why would you use the phrases versus the request offering? When's the right way to use both of those two things?
So it's really down to user behavior, I think. Some people like to use the Ticket Virtual Agent where they can come in here and they can ask any of these phrases. Another way that they could make use of these phrases would be in the request portal, which we'll see here in a minute. I'll kind of show both ways. But these phrases are part of the deflection process where a user, kind of has a rough idea of what they want, and then Ticket Virtual Agent or the request portal helps bring them to the solution. And then the request offering is going to be presented in the service catalog. So if they go to the service catalog, they know exactly what they need. They click this button called license request, and they get the same experience.
Okay.
Right?
So there's a good chance you're going to want both of those things because different users will want to interact different ways.
That's right. Okay, so we've built this service catalog item. So now this is available to the end users. It is active. And so now I'm going to come in here as my end user.
Now's the exciting part.
Now, well, we'll see what happens. So I'll start with the phrases because, you asked the question. If we look at requests now, I do actually have my license request. I can come in here and I can see the form, but I want to say I need to make cute cat pictures. Here we go. So we've got license type. We know that's going to be Copilot. And my reason is making cute cat pictures is a huge part of my job. And it takes too much time to do manually.
And you need those Instagram likes. I know you, Justin.
There we go. So now I've created a ticket and we'll see right away that we go into the setup process, which is going to include, that setting up that dynamic approval. I'm actually going to flip over back to my agent view here. and go to tickets and look at that new ticket we just created. But you can also see where,
Oh, cool, the title.
yeah, the title's been fixed. So we know it's a license request. We know it's Copilot. And also, you might have seen TVA just popped up there where I've been added as an approver. Now we're on the approval phase. If we look at the two approvals that are
So
here,
setup phase is already done.
setup phase is already done. Dynamic approval's been built. We're just clicking along here.
Wow.
So you can see approve Copilot license request. You know, this is what's going to the line manager. So Addison is Ben's manager. She's got all the info that she needs. You know, reason as stated by submitter, which was Ben Howell. She's been added. Making cute cat pictures is a huge part of my job, and it takes too much time to do manually. I need those IG likes, please. That's what Ben said. Of course, she's going to approve. Now, it also went to me because I'm the director, supposedly, in this scenario. So I can approve, but again, to Jeff's point earlier, it's not going to move on to the automation piece until both of us approve. And so I am going to ask Addison to approve real quick, and she does. So we should see this update pretty quick. So again, we both got notifications in real time that an approval has been submitted for this process. We don't even have to interact with the ticket. If we both have Ticket Virtual Agent installed, we both get notifications about it, like I said, in real time, very quick and easy to go into Ticket Virtual Agent and approve those requests. Another, there's several other ways to do that. If I hadn't approved it, which I just did, but I could go to the request portal as an agent. I can go into my work as an agent and see the approvals that are assigned to me. If I'm going to give this a quick refresh because I did approve off screen, and I'd be willing to bet that not only is approval complete, but yes, our ticket is resolved and the license application has also been complete, and we can validate that by going here to the Copilot licensed users. And if we look at the membership and we go to members, there's Ben Howell. He was just added. It might have been more effective if I would have shown that he wasn't there before, but I promise he did
we
get.
trust you. You wouldn't
We
fake that.
we can look at the flow if you like, but yeah, it absolutely did just add him to that group. He didn't exist there before. And that's our process. So we built it again from, requirements gathering with the user that has the process, mapping it into ticket with life cycles, templates, and the service catalog, or not even necessarily the service catalog, but the catalog item. The catalog item is what's going to be exposed to the user in both, again, the ticket virtual agent and the service catalog and the request portal. And then finally, we built the automation that handles both the setup and the actual implementation of the process. Yay.
Well done. Congratulations on a successful demo as well.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, it was pretty smooth.
Not one you can take for granted, I know.
Reshare the deck here. So you said we had some questions about some part of the process. Are there any remaining questions?
Oh, yes, I've just refreshed and there's a bunch of questions. So can you set it up for either one or the other manager to approve, or do you have to have both? Great question.
So I think there's a couple of ways we could slice that. I think so there's an option in approvals where yes, if one person approves, then it's valid. You don't need all, but you can also have it where they have to all be where each approver on the approval has to approve. And so there's a couple of different ways you could slice that. I think you could make it work either way according to whatever your process is.
there's that toggle, isn't there? So the simplest way is to add them all into one single approval object rather than what Justin did, which was to split it out today. If it's all on one, there's a toggle that says, do they all need to approve or just the first one to get there?
Right. And again, you would probably set that in the, I mean, if that's core to your process, you would set it in the lifecycle definition. And no matter how many dynamic approvers we add to that single approval, it's going to honor that setting.
Yeah. The other way to do that is with a custom transition. This is getting a little bit deep.
Yeah.
But if you want more about that, then obviously you know where to find us and ask about custom transitions, but it's not probably in scope for today. All right, great question. There's another one as well. Does Ticket support SLA timers that stop/restart depending on whether a request is awaiting approval or in an automation state equals pending? Oh, sorry. Depending on whether a request is awaiting approval or an automation. And then they put state equals pending as a kind of, is that the way to do it?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's either going to be met or not. So, and that's going to depend on status again. So what you might want to do is have multiple SLAs. Like rather than stop start, you might want to have multiple SLAs because again, it's either going to be met or it's not. And so if it like leaves the status that is part of the SLA definition, that's not going to stop it. That's going to actually meet it, I believe. And then so you might want to have multiple SLAs is I think the short answer for different parts of the process, attached to different kind of properties of the ticket.
You need a ticket status for those phases, and then have something that kind of controls those and sets the status according to where it actually is in the life cycle or
Right, and again, that
so,
could be dynamic too, right? Like when we get, when you see the switch in Power Automate, and we're going down a different track based on, it could be anything in a process. We use a particular license type to drive, the logic in the automation, but it could be anything. If you could even hinge on status. If it's pending, take this action. If it's active, take this action. If it's new, take this action. And that could be, there's all kind. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff in Power Automate. But I think in terms of the SLAs, I think you probably want multiple SLAs to accomplish that variability. It doesn't, like I said, it doesn't stop start. It if it reaches a terminal condition like status is no longer pending, that's met. And again, there is a time component to that. So, it's going to be pending for X hours or, due date and resolution date don't match or whatever. It's going to, there's going to be a time constraint there probably. But again, when that's either met or breached, those are the outcomes. It won't stop and then start. Good questions.
Yeah, great questions. That's it on the questions. Alex, thanks. So unless there's any more last minute ones, we can start to wrap up, Justin, I think.
Yeah. Cool. Well, appreciate everybody coming out today. Hopefully this was helpful in terms of how to build a process from kind of start to finish in Ticket. There's lots to it. You have to build multiple pieces, but hopefully we gave you understanding about why you have to build those different pieces, when you're getting a process from another user or another department, another team, whatever, how those map into Ticket, and then ultimately what it looks like to go start to finish through that process as the user. If you have any questions about any of this, definitely reach out, help@cyerson.com. You might end up in a conversation with me or Jeff. We have other folks on the team as well that are available to answer questions. And if we can't help, we can get you to someone who can. So definitely, if you have questions around Ticket, feel free to reach out. We'd love to connect and dive into anything that you want to talk about as it relates to Ticket.
Or cute cats. Also
Jeff
good.
is the cute cats department. If you have questions about cute cats, definitely reach out to Jeff. All right. Thanks to everybody.
Well, I'm going to say thanks, everyone, and appreciate everyone's participation today. Thank you, Justin, and we'll see you all soon.
Thanks, Jeff.